All right, it's a little after 3 and it looks like more people are signing on, so I think we'll get started. My name is Catherine Dorney. I'm a PhD candidate at the Center for Literacy and Disabilities Studies, which is in the Division of Allied Health Sciences in the Department of Allied Health Sciences in the Division of Speech and Hearing Sciences. I am under the mentorship of Dr. Karen Erickson. I am a speech language pathologist and have been for over 20 years. I worked with the gamut of children with speech and language needs, but my personal own interest was in working with students with early communication and language needs. And I worked in special education preschool programs in New York. And after school, I would be contracted by school districts to go into families' homes to provide services. And that's when I encountered many more school-aged students with significant disabilities who needed AAC but didn't always have it. I came down to North Carolina for my PhD because I wanted more information about language learning in this population, and which also then opened up the doors for me to learn about literacy instruction for this population. So I'm also, if interested, I am an administrator and one of the moderators of the Facebook page, AAC for the SLP. So if you are interested in AAC and like to engage with a community of other learners, if you want, consider joining. We try and keep some good resources and have healthy discussions. So let's get started. I should point out that I am an employee of the Center for Literacy and Disabilities Center, Disability Studies. Wait, I spelled that wrong, because my research assistantship is funded under the grant from the U.S. Department of Education and Office of Special Education and Offices of Special Education Programs, which has provided me this wonderful opportunity to be able to get my PhD. And I'm working under projects such as Project Core and Tar Heel Shared Reader and some other few things. So my aim for y'all was to hope that you'll learn to be able to describe the value and role of responsive aided language input as part of communication intervention with pre-symbolic communicators. So I'm going to do my best. We're going to try and concentrate on that population, as they can be of any age. Identify 3 critical steps of shared reading focused on building interaction engagement, and to describe the 3 ways to apply responsive aided language input using core vocabulary. So my intention of focusing on shared reading was the notion that this could be facilitated pretty much like the other emergent literacy instruction routines virtually. And I also thought this could be a good start for others if you're trying to help families build into some routines for AAC intervention. Okay, so what I think, this is a relatively small group. I am going to keep my eye on the chat. So if I explain something and you need me to repeat, or definitely ask questions, I am trying to make this that this will be more interactive. So, let's learn from each other. So everybody communicates, and communication stems from relationships. And the building block of relationships is respect and trust. And to me, building relationships is more about making sure you understand someone, or that they understand you, but it's also making sure that people feel that they're being understood. And for pre-symbolic communicators and early learners, that idea of learning to engage and interact with another person can be one of those really needed early aspects of relationship building. And when we discuss pre-symbolic communicators are typically defined based on their expressive output, that they're not yet using symbols to communicate. And to me, this doesn't take into consideration what that person understands. And also in consideration when we're trying to set up and consider an AAC intervention, we just rely on what to provide pre-symbolic communicators. I think not only does it get lost into what does a student understand and what do we want to provide for language intervention, but we also have to be considerate that this person has been on this planet for 16 years. So they have all this experience with what communication has been for them. And they kind of rely on those previous interactions, and which can inform how they're going to learn. So this could be, a consideration in that it may take some, a different amount of time because perhaps this individual or this student hasn't had this experience that you may be the first person that are providing them with this type of language instruction. And with this, when we think of AAC intervention, I don't consider it just for expressive communication. I think this is a language learning tool and that we're addressing receptive language too, right? But unfortunately, the literature really is not really very supportive of this due to the limited amount of receptive language interventions for this population. For let's say, for when I say this population, I would also include not just for students with complex communication needs, but many of these pre-symbolic communicators, if they're school aged and they're over 5, they may have more significant support needs. And in the literature, the focus and the participants all tend to be symbolic communicators coming into it. So our understanding of expressive language development with complex communication needs is something that we need. So when we also think of that expressive receptive language, these are just constructs that were developed by researchers, academics, and clinicians. If they're two different things, we're actually they kind of work off each other and can develop together. So I kind of want to consider that we're working on both, particularly with children who are pre-symbolic communicators. If we kind of reflect and think of the typically developing children without all this high support needs, are provided with all this input beforehand. So also little PSA that really consider the vision and hearing assessment. Cortical vision impairment is really under-identified in this population, as well as hearing loss, particularly with students with speech and feeding needs. So before I kind of go any further, I believe that there are speech language pathologists listening today and special educators and parents. Am I missing anybody? Okay, all right. So many of you have been following the multi-year work on Project CORE, and we recognize that many schools don't have experts or professionals to support students with complex communication needs, which is why we created this implementation model. Well, hey, Mary Jane, deaf and hard of hearing teacher. I hope I answered your question on the HOVA app. So our aim was to create an implementation model that allows a core vocabulary approach to AAC to be implemented by scale to teachers, because the students are in the classroom with the teachers all day long, but with the support from speech language pathologists using evidence-based strategies. So if, and these evidence-based strategies are considered naturalistic teaching, personal AAC systems, core vocabulary, aided language input, and attributing meaning to communication acts, which we're going to dig into. So if you want to dive more into the literature, if you go to the Project Core website under research and go underneath annotated bibliography, our annotated bibliography is there and it's set up into these separate areas. And if you want to, you can download separate PDFs for yourselves or to share. So we're going to start with naturalistic teaching. So naturalistic teaching, right? Because naturalistic teaching of communication is reciprocal with adults and students co-constructing vocabulary within a social communicative context. So when we encourage students' interests to lead the way in teaching them in different environments with different materials and different activities that are attracted to them, as this is a student-centered instruction. So, and natural teaching can occur throughout the day in different contexts, partners, and materials, which will lead to increased teaching opportunities and generalization across environments. And that idea of different materials and different activities and different people kind of contributes to that idea of repetition with variety. And when we consider communication and language-enriched instruction as the basis of naturalistic teaching, it's going to embed all the components of language: the vocabulary, the syntax, the way words are put together, and pragmatics, the way we use words socially, and also how to use the AAC system that they have. So within a natural teaching situation, it occurs when we allow the teaching to evolve from the student's interests and even the natural communication opportunities that come within that, that session or that lesson. So within our work at Project Core, we really saw the need for individual systems that stayed with the students throughout the whole day, within reach. So, well, because if the student doesn't have personal access to AAC, then their symbolic communication decreased if they didn't have access, because you can't use one if you don't have one. So, and with this, with their personal systems, is that the students will learn the location of the symbol in their system when we use aided language input on their own system. So providing demonstrations with systems that are similar, but it's also important to show them where it is on their system. And what we did is that during the first year of Project Core, we saw, okay, well, we take some responsibility, because at first we provided these classroom-sized boards with Velcro symbols that would go on top of it. And what the idea is that if we take these Velcros and put them up, that the children will see the combination of symbols, but we totally jumped the gun on that. We kind of stopped that because we saw adults holding up one or two symbols within a session. These floating symbols would come from nowhere, and teachers or speech pathologists would present two symbols. Do you want it or not? Do you like it or not? Do you want it or do you like it? So it kind of removed that opportunity for all that other demonstration and just kind of led this idea of there was this binary choice, and then the child doesn't know where that symbol is on their system. So I'm sure you all recognize that dynamic intervention and assessments are needed, and there's students that need multiple access methods. So they, there is a thing, maybe they could be an eye gaze user, but you might start with partner assisted scanning first, or you might start with partner assisted scanning if they're going to be a switch user. But then there is also this notion that eye gaze is real. Well, not this notion, because I've experienced eye gaze is tiring. I think I did it for 5 minutes and my eyeballs are dry. So that idea that a student, can get fatigued, and if they're in this perfectly suited wheelchair that is holding their system, and when they're removed from that wheelchair, they don't have access to their system. So we need, an alternate, also we need an alternate just in case something happens, but we want that backup, but we have to think of multiple access methods. And maybe perhaps some of you listening today may not have somebody that they can go to or an assistive technology person in your school district, because that happens in other, definitely parts in other states, that we offer the universal course selection tool, which is a decision tree. So it asks you questions and then you answer it, and it gives suggestions of like how to get started. By no means are we trying to replace an evaluation, but we see that there is a need to get students with significant needs access to AAC. So we built into that tool if you want to check it out. So we have core vocabulary. Now, high frequency conceptual words is there any reason for me to think that this is new to anybody? So with high frequency conceptual words, it leads to flexible use. Now, there is this big discussion in AAC literature, I think even since the late 80s, 90s, that there's no synchronous input. So we're speaking to these children and we're expecting them to use symbols back. When we apply core vocabulary, we saw in a case study that I did, is that when there was core vocabulary, the use of aided language input increased. So it's going to provide this synchronous input. I am using the symbols I'm expecting you to use. I'm providing that input. And when we have core vocabulary, we're also providing students with the form, content, and use of language right from the beginning. We're giving you the access to it. There's no need for you to demonstrate that you know all the words on this system. We're going to teach you this. So you'll learn the meanings of the symbols as you use them, as we use them. You'll learn the form that, because at least with the universal core, I'll show you next, is that each word is a standalone word. It has meaning all by itself, but they all can be combined with each other. So you're getting that input of syntax, and then you're also getting that input of pragmatic use. And to me, core vocabulary is reflected of the intent of the communicators, okay? When those early gestures that we see that are so communicative and that language builds upon it, that we can map in the meaning of what the student is communicating. Can't do that with nouns. So the kid shakes their head no, or that kid sends something flying because they don't want it. Nouns can't be mapped on to that action to teach that kid, oh, this is what you're communicating to me. But core vocabulary, like words like a nod or stop, can. So these are the universal core vocabulary words. These are not the only words, but we focused on these words. And if you are interested, you can go on the Project Core website. We have a whole technical paper that describes where these words came from. But as you see, each word has a meaning as a single word, and they can be combined really, really easy. And there's different versions of the universal core vocabulary that's on the page for direct selection, partner assisted, eye gaze. But as I talk about core vocabulary, we have this shared reference of these 36 words, but it's not that you have to use the format for Project Core to make it work. We kind of make the emphasis, it's about the words, which is why many systems include these words and are actually paired with us. We have links on our website of where to find these really powerful 36 words on the different systems available. All the big names it's all on the website. So we can use this, and they're included in many commercially available core vocabulary sets. So with aided language input, we've got pointing to the words to pair with our speech. That's how it's defined in the literature. So it's It's also can be viewed as that we point to the keywords as we see them. So teacher's excited that our student is here at arrival. You are here, as she touches you and here. So aided language input supplements spoken language and can explicitly show children what is possible to communicate and how to do this. Okay, because we know children use the words adults use when communicating with them. Last year, Dr. Quick and colleagues did a analysis of language samples of 16 moms and their toddlers. And there was 12 moms, and approximately 80% of those language samples consisted of the same 267 words. 267 words. And there was much overlap between the moms. And then they saw that the children learned to use those core words that the mom used. So the other idea is what sometimes with core vocabulary, I know I'm backtracking, is the idea that they're too abstract, they're too conceptual. Well, even starting in preschool, it's all about conceptual words. And there's no such thing as a symbol hierarchy. And in fact, they've demonstrated that iconicity of a word really may only play a role if the child already knows the vocabulary. So if these are all new words, what that graphic symbol doesn't look like, because if you really think about it, speech, I mean, that is not at all iconic, and it is the most abstract symbol, and we're talking to these children all day long. So, you know, the rationale that we can pair it with a word and show the students how to use it and what it means is valuable. And much like we have to be consistent with expectations of typically developing children with providing all those thousands and thousands of communication opportunities. Pausing, listening to us, those little ones like develop and that they're being communicative. And we also, you know, provide thousands of models of spoken language before we expect a student to use a single word. So we want to give these students in the earliest stages of communication the same opportunities. And we can provide them the same language learning opportunities as students who use speech. So we're kind of providing them with opportunities of that language. We really want to provide that language experience. And with this language experience comes the idea of attributing communicative meaning, okay? And the teaching principle here of encouraging communication without requiring it is all about allowing our students to lead the direction of our naturally occurring interactions and using these interactions as valuable teaching opportunities. So when we encourage communication, we want to acknowledge their communication in all forms. And then that can provide us opportunities to show the students how to use their system without demands, right? We can show them how to use their system, encourage them to use it without demands. We can encourage them to use their system. We can encourage them to use a more conventional, non-symbolic to kind of move it in that direction. But overall, we have to be patient and responsive to all their subtle or not so subtle communication attempts as we demonstrate these more conventional forms. Again, without requiring use through prompting techniques. They are communicating already. So we can acknowledge their communication, but we can also take it a step more. We know that pre-symbolic communicators benefit from that immersive language instruction with adults attributing communicative meaning and providing language input reflected of the words the adults say. And we also know that when it comes to attributing communicative meaning, adults can learn to do this. They can learn to look for signs for communication, attributed meaning. But when I say we're going to take it a step more, let's dig in. So using communication matrix as a guiding framework, we see two groups of communicators. Symbolic communicators use symbols to express themselves. And in these situations, we really don't have to interpret. We don't necessarily have to interpret what they mean. For pre-symbolic communicators who are intentionally or not yet intentionally communicating symbolically, we have to attribute communicative meaning to their actions. So communication matrix is organized up to 7 levels of communication ability, but I just indicated the first 4 here since we're talking about pre-symbolic communicators. So at level 1, students are using pre-intentional or reflexive behaviors. They're not yet controlling their body actions, and they're not yet intentionally being communicative. So these can be more reflexive, could be like hunger or discomfort, but the listeners interpret it as communication. And same thing with level 2. So these students have more control over their body, but when their actions are not yet intentionally communicative, meaning that they're still learning that their actions influence another person and in their environment. And their actions, they might not be bringing another person into it. So this could be, you know, a child sees something and on the table and they go out and they just reach for it, you know, I want it, so I'm just going to take it. So, and a reach can be interpretive as, oh, that child wants it. And maybe, you know, you might work with a population that goes to reach stuff because they want them, but maybe because of physical needs that they just can't really grab it. But that reaching is communication. So, but it becomes a level 3 and described as unconventional communication when the children learn, well, then when the children demonstrate that they know their actions impact others and in their environment. So like the communication matrix will show you that you'll see a dual orientation. So this might not be eye gaze or face to face, you know, particularly if like a child has a visual impairment, they just might orient to the speaker, or there'll be children that will look up to you. So that reach might be like a look up to an adult like, hey, can you get that for me? And that will be viewed as unconventional communication because, well, Roland kind of describes it because these are communicative behaviors that are seen in much younger children. So you have an 8-year-old that's reaching and looking, that would probably be considered unconventional because we would expect an 8-year-old developmentally to use a more conventional communication that's more universally understood. And level 4 of the conventionals are the child that instead of reaching will point and look to you like, hey, I want that. Or instead of an unconventional communication, you know, you hand that child a book and they just push it away. Versus conventional might look at, you know, shake their head no, like, no, I don't want it. But unfortunately, negative affect expressions, non-intentional communication, and unconventional forms of communication are often viewed as maladaptive and lacking in communicative intent. So there is this focus to eliminate it without the child having the experience of learning the meaning and how to express themselves more conventionally. And to me, that is a lot of lost learning opportunities. So it's important, though, to note that there are benefits of responding differently to different pre-symbolic communicators. And there's a different application of responsive aid and language input. So that transition from pre-intentional to intentional communication is developmental, okay? But we know with increased communication opportunities and adult responsivity, the intentionality can increase. But we have to be really careful at creating this line or this boundary because it's not all or not. You know, it develops like a continuum. And we're not dealing here with a readiness model, because, you know, it develops in a continuum. So a lack of intentional communication should not preclude access to language intervention or access to AAC. No, can't, you know, learn language with symbols. You need access to them. So so with increased opportunities, and they've shown that adults can learn how to attribute meaning differently for this different population. Okay, so think about it from an intentional communicator. Oh, you want to tell the child what they're doing that's communicative. Okay. Oh, you're reaching for it. I think you're telling me get that, as you point to the symbol get. The child smiling. Oh, you're smiling. I think you're telling me that you like it, and you point to the word like. Or, you know, and you want to include that child in the lesson and they completely turn away from you. We've had that. Oh, you're turning away from me. You not want to turn. And then you can show them, like, no, I hear that you're communicating, but here's another way that you can say it without requiring it. So that's an intentional communicator, okay? The child has a deliberate plan and they're aware of their affect and they're going to be persistent until they get it. But I'm also going to add, just to sprinkle it in a little bit, that, you know, your pre-symbolic communicators might be, you know, early emergent, because they might have their system and you're seeing the children look at it. I mean, in my case study, we saw preschool children with autism, like looking at the boards. They had they called them aided language input boards, but they were core vocabulary boards in the classrooms. And we saw the kids looking at them or rubbing them, touching the different symbols, taking it from the teacher. So they were kind of showing that they were connecting that this system is important, even when they're still learning that this is communication. So if they point to a symbol that was kind of unexpected, or they're just pointed to a symbol, acknowledge it, you know, because that's how we can be more responsive, by acknowledging it. Oh, you touched get. And that's the beauty of core vocabulary. You're going to be able to apply that word that they selected to your context. Oh, you just told me get. But we did see educators, if a child touched get, we saw educators turning around, oh, you touched get. I think you were telling me finished, and just moving the finger over to finish. But can you recognize the value of feedback in here that, oh, you touched this symbol, this is what it means, and then adding more to it. So again, that's that intentional communicator that's still trying to learn how to work these symbols and what these symbols mean, that we don't want to discount it. So again, that provides that we can see over time in my case study that the adults started to become more responsive. And we seek for adults acknowledging and commenting and honoring, responding or imitating or engaging with that student in response to their communication. So because when communication is honored and respected and supported with responsive communicators, this is going to build intentionality. So the difference, what I should bring in the difference is here, where do I bring on the next page? I'll bring it up on the next page. That supported when communication partners are responsive. This is going to build intentionality and provide language opportunities. And when we watch and observe and assign meaning and honor their thoughts and actions, that's how we can value our students as members of our community, that they're already communicating. So when we attribute communicative meaning, right, we're respecting all forms of communication. So in the literature, there's a term called linguistic mapping. This is when I verbally mark, or we verbally mark what the child is communicating through their gestures and their actions. So step back and reflect. Like, we do this with very young children. Oh, you're fussing, I think you're tired. And we see with the use of linguistic mapping with early communicators with disabilities, it increases receptive and expressive language outcomes. And we can do this with students learning to use AAC. So responsive aided language input is attributing communicative intent, honoring, and demonstrating a symbolic equivalent. And this can be done, not like in that order, with intentional communicators. So in the context of a student pushing away, oh, you push it away, you're telling me not this one, and honor it. But we have to respond differently to pre-intentional communicators. So these students, again, remember, they don't really have control of they might have control of their bodies. They're just still learning that their actions could be communicative. So what they find in the literature is that the honoring that communication non-linguistically is more important. Okay, you're going to get the children are going to increase their intentionality. So that same thing. So with an intentional communicator who's not yet like communicating to another person, you got to let them know, oh, how you registered that they're communicating. Oh, you reached. Oh, you smiled. And then respond to it non-symbolically. So maybe for one of your students that has more physical needs, and you know, whether it's physically and some vision issues, and they naturally smile, let them know, oh, you smiled. I think you're telling me you like, you know, I think you're telling me you like it, get it to them. Provide maybe what they're really interested, give it to them. Then demonstrate that symbol. Because they found that by honoring it, meaning like giving access to it or pulling whatever they want away, that just adding linguistic mapping was not enough. Because the action, I took it as that it's more salient to the child. This is how you communicated, here you go. Oh, this is what it means. And this is how you can communicate it. So when we consider the difference, aided language input is from the communication partner's perspective. As they communicate, as I communicate, I point to symbols that reflect the words I'm saying. Responsive aided language input is from the AAC user's perspective. And that's how we're teaching students to communicate a more conventional form of what they're already communicating. What's possible for them to say? Oh, when you do this, you know, it looks like you mean this, and this is how you can say it. But I don't have to use prompting techniques to get them to do it. So in this way, the student's communication becomes a source of the AAC language instruction. So another example for a pre-intentional, again, you might have a student that's physically involved and they're just moving a lot in their chair. Honor it. Get in there, acknowledge, reposition them. Oh, you're moving a lot, let me move you. And then showing them on the communication system, you were moving a lot, I think you were telling me help. And like holding that symbol so they see, I think you were telling me help. Now after, you want to add aided language input and saying, yeah, I helped you, you know. Or responsive aided language, oh, I helped you. And maybe the child turns around and smiles, or maybe they don't smile. Oh, you're not smiling yet. Oh, is it not good? Maybe you tell me it's not good, and then wait. See for some other actions, and then you might be able to attribute meaning to more. Oh, I think you move, and then move them a little bit more. And that provides this dialogical instruction involving responsive aided language input and aided language input. Okay, so that you see the difference between the manner and the frequency of adult responsivity is important. So when we consider aided language input, responsive aided language input. We want to contribute meaning to the students' actions, and we interpret the meaning, and we can provide responsive aided language input that matches their intent, because we're not considering their communication. I think we're undervaluing that person's role and their interests and their agency in their interaction, and losing lots of language opportunities. You know, for some of these students, I mean, we don't know, but they may not be independent. They might always be interdependent on another, but they're learning that they have a say what happens to them and what happens to their bodies. Because when students lead programs and they're still pre-symbolic, they're at high risk for something not good to happen to them. So, and when we consider recognizing what a student doing, determining what it means, and honor it and demonstrate a symbolic equivalent, and there's other students in the group watching this, so within a class lesson, you're maximizing your learning time teaching in a group, because now they're watching their friends. They're watching their friends' actions and adults' responses, and the use of the language. They're benefiting from more access to hearing aided language input versus doing individual sessions. And then again, like they're watching how adults work with other peers and how they communicate, and then they can learn from each other. So I wanted to bring in some opportunities to practice some responsive aided language input. Are you all down with that? I don't have access to using like breakout rooms, so I thought we would use the chat. Does that all work with you? Or we can, you know, if you guys want to, for this, we can turn off your mics if you want to contribute that way. Okay, okay. All right, super, okay.
Questions, concerns, disagreements with how I sorted it, problems that came up?
I hear someone talking, I just don't know if you're talking to me. Okay, so let's practice some responsive aided language input. I'm gonna give you 3 scenarios with a picture of a student communicating. I want you to recognize what the student is doing, determine what it means, and what symbols can be demonstrated that represents the communicative intent of the student. And then write the symbol equivalent in the chat box and what could be done to honor it. So I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna say, don't jump in and write to the chat. Just like, I'll let you know, because let everybody have their little time to process everything in their head, since we can't do breakout rooms. Okay, so here's the first one. So during a classroom art activity, a student was busy painting, and the vocational education teacher walked in and said to the student, okay, it's your turn to go. And this is the student's response. What is she doing? What does it mean? What symbol can be demonstrated that represents her communicative intent? All right, anybody want to throw out some ideas? All right, so we have some ideas, some probably, all right, so we have some ideas for no, not like, you know, and also she's really interested in continuing what she's doing. You know, you might want to go, oh, you still want to do, and point to the word do. Or you know, not, and then how can we attribute meaning? How can we honor her request? So it might be, you might have to set a timer. Oh, you know, you're not ready to go now. I'll set a timer. You can do, or that vocational ed teacher can stay in and let her know, okay, we're gonna stay in. And then she realizes her communication is respected. So this, at the same point, at some other point, one student was really upset and lost it and began to scream and yell. And this was her peers' response. Oops, not that one. This was the peers' response. So the kid's screaming, and this is how she's communicating. What is she telling everybody? What does this mean? And what symbol can be demonstrated that represents what she's communicating? And how can we honor her? All right, whenever you're ready. I don't have quite on my core vocabulary words, Christina, but you may. So she has this, yeah, she might be, stop. Stop, or, not, or, get that kid away or get me away from here. I'm finished. I'm done with this. Get out. I don't know. Okay. Now this one, in terms of thinking of for shared reading. So a teacher makes a comment, they're doing shared reading, teacher makes a comment to one of the students, and this is the student's response. The little girl with the lei on. Oh, stop sad. Oh, that's sweet. So this little girl, they're doing shared reading, teacher makes a comment, and this student, leans over and touches the teacher. What do you think this means? What can you demonstrate to this student that represents what she's communicating, and how can you honor it? Suggestions? Okay, sorry. Here. Help. Yeah. And I think, when we're thinking about pre-symbolic communicators, that idea, thinking about demonstrating the one word. I mean, granted, I might say two and point to one, so they can, and then hold that point so they can see it. And that little girl, she was very communicative. Okay, let's move on. So using these principles that I reviewed, and I wanted to point out why we use the word demonstrate. Oh yeah, I think you have something to say. Has a pod system to show them, right, Jenna? So we use the word demonstrate versus model because we're demonstrating the possibilities of communication and providing demonstrations on how symbols and words are used to support expressive and receptive language. Our aim is not, I will show you exactly what symbol to use, and then I want you to use it. And I'm going to use prompting procedures to make sure you use it. We're not doing that. So we decided as a team that we really want to use the word demonstrate without requiring, because we're not looking for compliance, we're looking for communication. So that idea of considering good communicating partners or attributing meaning, making sure those students have their personal systems with really useful vocabulary, encourage communication, and offer that sufficient time. Again, especially we're discussing pre-symbolic communicators for a number of reasons. They could need additional processing time, as well as organizing their bodies, or organizing their eyes, or organizing their ears, so they're taking in the information. And this last principle is making sure there is a worthwhile topic to communicate, because if I'm not interested, I don't have anything to say. Which brings us to really considering, I love this quote by Bruner, that we really have to consider terms of what this child is communicating before speech comes in, or speech may not come in. but what they're communicating is important. But going back to saying, you know, that idea of having important topics to discuss, this is where literacy is a great place to start. And it's an important start for many reasons, especially for considering students with more significant support needs. So what we found with doing the Project Core is that we added the instructional routines, like the emergent literacy routines at the end of the first year, because we really saw a need to create some worthwhile topics and context for the students. We observed a lot of talk about students, how could I say, students' biological functions. You know, 17-year-old boys being told, hey, you want to go to the potty? So we're thinking, like, how can we bring in language and different topics to talk about? But we also wanted to help the teachers provide the kind of instruction that they needed to be doing in order to work through the state standards in English language arts. And in the state standards for English language arts, speaking and listening are standards. And so we wanted to bring in these instructional routines in addition to like how to encourage it in naturally occurring classroom routines. So to bring you an idea of the model that we use is from Copenhagen and colleagues, is this integration of language and literacy. So I recognize we're talking about pre-symbolic communicators, right? But, you know, it's really suggested to start reading books from babies from birth. So, and when we look at this speaking and listening model, right? I want you to look at the arrows more than the text, because it's that integration. And you see, this is not a model of readiness with prerequisites. Emergent literacy starts at birth, right? So we rely on the traditional stage model, okay? We have all these prerequisites before we can give these students, and again, many of them have significant learning needs. You know, what point are we going to be bringing in reading? And again, we're talking about students with complex communication needs. So we want to bring in literacy, because literacy is so important. And with pre-symbolic stages, we got to bring in some of the early stages of that too, because with literacy for students, for any individual complex communication needs, it's going to also support personal communication. Never mind side point, we're talking about students that improved literacy brings better educational outcomes. And remember, we're teaching to the standards. So how can we incorporate all this? And the speech language pathologists, you know, we have a role in literacy. The teachers have a role in it, literacy, as our other teachers of deaf and hearing impaired, as well as vision impairment. So let's consider this and how we can maximize using instruction. And we're going to be talking about shared reading, but just as importantly is that idea of bringing in print awareness, because we want these kids learning to read and spell and write so they can say what they want to whomever they want, whenever they want, with those 26 extremely flexible symbols, the letters. So, and I see that there's this idea that a focus on functional skills. And if reading, writing, and spelling is not functional, I'm completely confused, because to me, it's like the most functional skill. So given we're talking about pre-symbolic communicators, but I wanted to show you this slide that notice like those top 4 questions. When you're trying to, if you want to bring in some more literacy into your instruction using a comprehensive literacy model, which is what we're required through ESSA, you want to ask 4 questions. Do the students know most of the letters most of the time? Engage actively during shared reading? So this doesn't mean first then, right? Because if you have to do, first we do this and then you get something fun, that child is not actively engaged in shared reading. We want the children to want to learn. So if you have to give a carrot to get them to do shared reading, they're really not actively engaging. We're gonna make sure the kids have a means of communication interaction, our pre-symbolic communicators. And then through the act of shared reading, we're gonna show them how to understand that writing involves letters and words. So if you have no for all four, you would do daily emergent literacy instruction. If you have a yes for one or more, you can do daily conventional intervention. So shared reading. So we're talking about shared reading because it's an evidence-based literacy instruction, and we know that students with more complex disabilities do not have the same experiences. They're coming into school at preschool level without the same experiences, and many of them are much older and they have not had the same experience with literacy or books. You know, that first picture I showed you, I love this. We call this at the center, we call this a book tornado. You know, if you have physical disabilities, you've never been surrounded with like all these books to explore. So we try and give these students these opportunities and find things that they enjoy. So we recognize that, you know, physical, cognitive, and communication impairments miss out on all the interaction, and that interaction is where the magic happens. And what we can do is provide this exciting, engaging routine that we're going to guide them at first, but they're going to take over the reins, right? We don't want quiet children during shared reading. We want them taking it over. We want them taking it over, making the comments, and eventually learning to ask questions and inviting others to participate. That's what we're looking for. And we do this by maximizing interactions. We want to make it interesting, exciting, about a topic that is of interest for them. So if you're doing science and the topic is space, you might have some Star Wars fans. So it might be making them that idea of outer space and rockets from some of your informational text. It might be to bring in a book about, you know, Star Wars characters, to get the students' attention. Like, whoa, this is related. I'm learning about science, and, you know, and my man Han Solo's in this book. All right, I'm going to pay attention. Ooh, I know things about him. And it might be not showing it symbolically, but you're going to see that excitement that you can capitalize on and provide responsive aided language input. Okay, so we want them to contribute, and we want to make connections. So it's between each other, seeing the excitement in each other's face, that the books and that the words I'm reading as the adult is the squiggly stuff on the bottom. And the words I'm using, I'm going to comment, I'm going to use symbols, because symbols are used for communication. And that your actions, we're going to make connections of your actions to the symbols, and make connections to your personal experiences to the book. So it might be that, you know, going back to the space and the rocket ship, maybe you don't have a Star Wars book, but you know your student is a huge Star Wars fan. Oh, in Star Wars, they flew on a spaceship. This is a different one. So you want to make those connections, and then use symbols that they can use. We want to show what's possible in communication. So really get into commenting, not asking questions. We're dealing with pre-symbolic communicators and the emergent readers. We're not asking comprehension questions. Right? We want to get them to initiate and participate. Okay, comment about what, and when we talk about commenting, we're going to make comments on what we think your students might say. And then they're going to see you doing this, and they're going to take over the lead. And what's really important is that idea that we want to pause and wait. So for shared reading, think of follow the car. Comment, ask for participation, and response. So adults do the reading. We show the flow of the routine, so they see what the routine is. And then The adults encourage students to start communicating about what they find interesting, and you learn more about your students, and then their participation increases. So this is interesting. I see a lot on social media that people look for core vocabulary books with a lot of core vocabulary that they can use for aided language input. But I'm going to twist it on you. You don't need core vocabulary books, because if we're teaching communication and language here, okay, I want you to think of making comments that you think your students may say, or remember response, what they may say. So if they see that spaceship and the kid smiles, even before it, you just might say spaceship. You might just demonstrate the word go. Because we want to think about their interest and what they would say. So I'm going to say go, and I'm going to pause, and I'm going to wait. And I'm going to look for little body actions. What could they add, right? So we want to make sure to consider that access to AAC system during this time, so the teacher can comment. So the teacher might point to the bigger symbol, but somebody's showing them on their system. So there's ask for participation. This is not ask questions. So consider this as another way of bidding. Take long pauses, and we're carefully watching for any type of communication, right? Because again, we might see personal systems being explored, touched, and rubbed. And you might, show a book to a child and they might just look away. Oh, not want to turn and wait. So you comment and wait. Ask for participation can be completely leaning in and showing with this expecting look that you're thinking somebody's going to say something. A student might become very excited, and then you can add the R, and respond. And I think this is where responsive aided language input can come in. And for the early communicators. So acknowledge, I see you're getting so excited about the spaceships. You like them, and the kid's arm starts going, oh, you want to go? You're letting the kid know, I heard you and I see you. And you have something to say about this really interesting topic. So respond, you might repeat that symbol that the kid says, you might repeat what the child does, and then add more and wait. So that's where it comes down to. That shared reading is about the interaction. And you're teaching communication. So if the core vocabulary book has if that word has a lot of the core vocabulary book and you're reading it and then touching the symbol, I'm just kind of wondering, where's that interaction piece going to be? So I have two things to do, and you let me know which way, because I'm looking at the time, because we can always go back. I have an example that we can practice on, but I also made a video of me doing it. So you want to practice, or do you want a video? You can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and let me know what you think. Okay, I think what we're going to do here is both. Okay, so I'm putting a link. Everybody see it? I put a link to a Tar Heel shared reader about escalators. Does everybody get it? Yeah, and I wanted to do a breakout room for this, but I didn't have that option, so we're going to make it work. So okay, hold on. Okay, so everybody, I have the escalator book up on my screen. Everybody see it? Cool. Thanks, Christina. So when we do shared reading, the first thing you're going to do is read the text. You want to differentiate the text for reading and the systems for communication. As we're not expecting children to read using their devices, we want their eyeballs on the print. So you put your finger under escalators as you read it. And then again, escalators are moving staircases. They gather people from one floor to another. And you're going to put your finger underneath it and get their eyeballs on that print. And then you're going to make a comment. Does anybody want to throw out a comment for this first page? Think about what your students would say if they saw this. So a comment might be go. A comment might be up. Yeah. So it'd say go, pause, wait. And like, think of your students right now, like what they might do. You might have a kid that hates escalators, that might just put on a face like, yeah, no thanks. So attributing meaning, oh, you not like them? Okay, Johnny doesn't like them. And then you can move on. You can find escalators in buildings. And, go or do or on, I go on. So these again are some comments. And again, it's not about like, oh, I can demonstrate, you can. We want to think about them to add comments. And with core vocabulary, we're teaching in this context, but these are the same words and same context that they can use outside of the book. Okay. So does that help? It's kind of hard when okay. Do you see how I'm differentiating? So don't get stuck that you need a core vocabulary book. You don't. You make the communication will come with the comments, and that's where the core vocabulary comes in. So the other night I made a video of myself, and I'm gonna make sure you could see it. And this is the universal core board, how it is. This is what I had access to. You're going to use whatever system that you have. And I'm going to start off, you're going to see me move from aided language input to responsive aided language input. I'm pointing out I was completely alone during this video, so my improv classes were helpful for this. Well, at least I think they were. This is our book. No, David, by David Shannon. David Shannon, he's the author. He wrote the words. And he's the illustrator because he drew all the pictures. Very clever. David, by David Shannon. David's mom always said, no, David. Look. You. No, David. Look. Go up, up. a bath. Like, you think that's a good idea? And now taking children's comments. You think that's funny? Janie, you're smiling. You think that's a good idea? Yeah. Well, you like more water? You're laughing, yeah. You like. Okay, so the first thing that you see are those Post-it notes, right? So I planned the core vocabulary comments for the book for the first time. And on each page, I mean, you might want to use smaller Post-its, pre-plan them. So you don't have to think on the fly, and put them on the page. And then again, because the next time you read it, you're not using the same comments every time you read on every page. You want to mix it up, because remember, we're teaching the possibilities. So with that consideration, I already have my comments set up. And then do you see the difference that, I just read the book. I used print referencing. I pointed to the words as I said them. And then I showed you how I differentiated, and then definitely pause much longer. And yeah, I was completely talking to myself as I was thinking about all my students and how they might communicate to this book. Did that contrast help you? Okay, and do you see with responsive aided language input, you're bringing them into the book. And I mean, it went on a little longer because I got a little creative, but I have another video too, because I don't know how to do this. I wanted to bring up all this important parts about print knowledge and why we use print referencing, but it's in the handout. And because I'm also going to show you some other resources for you to be able to dig in more about the literacy component about this, even for our pre-symbolic communicators, because typically developing children do not look at the print in books, like 6% of them. Right, so it's just like CAR with typical students, but encouraging words that they have available on their system. And the other difference too is that, and again, I'm going to encourage you, I'm going to show you that next, the Tar Heel Shared Reader website, is that once your kids are really going on really well with the CAR, they're doing the CAR, then you can take and put the crowd in the CAR. But I wanted to stick with just the CAR because of our topic today was pre-symbolic communicators. But I'm going to show you the website, and then you can find out more about how to build in more language with putting the crowd in the CAR. Again, it's in your handout about print referencing. It helps them understand the language. There's different ways to do it, verbal and nonverbal. And I wanted to show you this because this first video here is a little girl with Rett syndrome before print referencing was introduced. Her mom just read the words on the bottom and didn't point to them. And with this eye gaze tracker, you can see her eyes are all over the page. She's probably seen trying to see the boundaries of the page. So this child with Rett syndrome has cortical vision impairment, and the red dots are her maintaining her attention longer. But print referencing instruction was done with the parents like 15 minutes over the phone, and look at the difference. Oh, print referencing. So mom reads Annie plays the tambourine, and the little girl has her eyes on these faces. They're really interested in facial features. So the focus is on the picture, not the words that mom's reading. Same way, mom's reading the bottom, but the little girl's eyes are on the face. But after print referencing, mom reads, Matt strums the guitar. You can see her eyes move. Oh, there's the face. Oh, there's that thing called a guitar. Oh, Mom's pointing down here. What are these squiggly things down here? So you can see that their eyes will move. Similarly, you know, the mom reads, the weather determines the kind of clothes we wear. Look, this word is weather. So she's using like a verbal reference, like this word says weather. We're having bad weather today. Relates it to something that the child can connect to. But notice that little girl looks down at that word weather, and then she's checking out the clothes because this is all related. So you can see that child is making connection, like, oh, mom's not just telling me a story. She's reading these words on the bottom. And so you can dig more into the shared reading on Project Core, or go to the shared reader website. We have modules and self-reflection tools like here. And these are like some things to look for that we want to see adults doing. And we've gotten reports from some of our coaches who are amazing that one teacher just had a little trouble with doing the print referencing. So rather than call them out, you know, they had a dialogue that the coach, who's also a special ed teacher, but you know, they could be speech language pathologists, led a lesson and purposely gave her this list. Let me know what of how I'm doing on all the things on this list, and left out print referencing. And from the other view, the teacher is like, oh, wait a minute, you didn't use print, you know, you didn't use print referencing, or, you know, you forgot to do this. And that helped that teacher go, oh, see the importance of it. So this could be a handy tool for someone to observe you. If you're a teacher or a speech language pathologist and you're being observed by your supervisor, give them one of these. I've been working on this for months. Now you can see what I've been working on and help them use this tool to help evaluate you. So now I made another video and this, I tried combining everything. Okay. So here I go. I'm being mindful of the time because I also want to show you a little bit more about Tar Heel Shared Reader. Am I talking too fast? Remember, I am from New York, so that is very possible. Okay. All right, we're going to read No David by David Shannon. Again, I have those comments listed, and I purposely tried doing different comments to show you don't want the same comments for each page, every read. David's mom always said, no, David. Happy. Right? Do we do this? Do we run on the rules? No way. What do you think? You think it's a good idea? Oh, you're laughing. You think it's a good idea? Wow. I not good idea. No. So in my imaginative world, I already had 3 back-to-back conversations with 2 or 3 or 6 kids, and I'm on the first page. Because remember, this is about communication. No, David. Look at him. Johnny, you're reaching. I think you're telling me how to look. Okay, here, look. Oh, you're touching. touched him, yeah. Oh, he's here. He's here. All right. I'm gonna just forward a little bit more if you're interested, because I can show you a little bit more where I did some print referencing. So you can comment about the picture sometimes. And then, you know, on another page, you might comment about the text. Oh, look, look at this. This is an uppercase N. Or the one word was like, no, David, no. And I pointed to no and no. I'm like, these are the same word. No. Like showing the kids that these words have meaning. Okay, so if you want to, you can go to Tar Heel Shared Reader. And there's even a website about a discussion about how do you select a good book, right? So you want to keep in mind that you want like a book that you can reread, maybe reread even more than in one session. You want to pick books that appropriate language complexity, because if the languages are too complex, if there's too many commas or there's too many lines, it might be too much for your kids to interact and comprehend. So you want to get those books that the kids are like, I'm all about writing in again. So you want simple sentences, right? So a group of monkeys is called a troop. Just one new word on a sentence. Again, thinking about they have these pictures don't necessarily support what's being read, okay? So the picture might be more interested for kids that are visual learners, but if the child cannot see the pictures, they're not losing anything by what you're reading. Because it says Tom gets in trouble all the time, but this kid doesn't really look like a troublemaker, right? So the child will get learn from the word I'm looking for. The child will learn from what as you read. So I'm gonna try and let me show you. Okay, and again, you can do it, but here, let's just get out of here. And I want to show you the site. How am I think we got a few minutes. Hold on. I appreciate your patience. Okay. So this is like the sister page, if you want to call it, of Tar Heel Shared Reader, because the books that are in Tar Heel Shared Reader are in Shared Reader. Hold on. Okay, can y'all see? So this is the website, sharedreader.org. So you can come in and you can check out coaching supports. So if you want to give, hold on, I'm getting lost on my page. I want to make sure just in case anybody asks a question, I can hear you, see you. Professional development. So there's going to be more discussion about shared reading, and it's going to bring in more literacy components, more about follow the car and put the crowd in the car, and print referencing. See down here, module 4, putting the crowd in the car. But quick reference guides if you need some more information that how to address shared reading with a deaf or a deafblind student and deaf or hard of hearing student, or quick reference guides, you can access it. But here's something that people think is really, really cool. So here's the Tar Heel Shared Reader. So I'm gonna literally pick the first one, okay? Notice on the bottom that we now have symbols. And we did this for various reasons. For some students had difficulty shifting away from their system to the page, and we want to keep their attention on the page. So we added the symbols on the bottom, and it has all 36. You can choose the layout. So you could put more than 4. You can also, of course I picked the book, that up in the corner. So the reading controls, I clicked that little button, the reading controls. So you can determine what words are available, and the comments are made. You can add your own, we put comments in, so, and that will change, that you could say, oh, this is the first time I'm reading it, so we'll have one set of comments. So you might cover and then, okay, done, gotcha. And then move to the next one, and there'll be a different comment. So just again, to encourage, like this one says in the top hand corner, he goes, that's for the adults. And then go here, he goes, and the next one might be want to go. So it gives you some ways to expand on the reading that you're doing. And I feel like it. Does anybody have any questions? And I put a handout with the resources up on the hover page for this. Well, I thank you all for being here today on this Friday afternoon. It looks like we're getting close to adult beverage hours. You know, oh, let me put up my email. I'll just flip it down here. So I gave resources, and here's my contact information. If you want to reach out to me, feel free. If you have any questions or anything like that. So I really appreciate your attention and your engagement in today's activity, and I hope I gave you some things to think about. Thank you so much for your participation today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.